Ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Chicago Board of Elections regular board meeting of May 26, 2020. If at any time during this call you need assistance, please press *0 for the operator. Note that this call is being recorded. And I would like to turn the conference over to Marisel Hernandez, Chair of the Chicago Board of Elections. Please go ahead, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. We will call to order the regular board meeting of the Board of Election Commissioners for the City of Chicago. My name is Marisel Hernandez. I'm the chair, and with me on the phone is Commissioner William Kresse and Jonathan Swain. The next item on the agenda is the consideration of the agenda. Are there any proposed changes or fixes? If not, then we'll proceed with the approval of the special board meeting minutes of February 25th, 2020. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved by Commissioner Swain.
Is there a second?
Second by Commissioner Kresse.
All those in favor, say aye.
Commissioner Swain votes aye.
Commissioner Kresse votes aye.
Great, thank you. The minutes are approved. The next item is the Executive Director's report. Mr. Gough.
Thank you, Madam Chair and board members. Just to let you know, it looks like all the PPE supplies needed to open up the office have been delivered. I will be walking the office with the Assistant Executive Director, Charles Holliday, and Clinton Hurd to go over where we should put all the sneeze shields in the office. We just want to try to get everything ready to open up when we get the all clear. Everything seems to be going well. We're working right now. This week we should have a final answer. We're looking at printing, the printing of the ballots. If we normally print by ballot style, this time we're going to be printing by precinct. It causes some additional problems, but it could save us a lot of time. And it's after reviewing the new legislation that's ready to be signed, looking at the number of applications that we have to mail out, the Group A, which means voted in any one or more of the following elections: November 2018, February 2019, April 2019, or March 2020. It looks like we will have approximately almost 1 million applications that we'll have to send out. So we're trying to figure out, we're working on that application now. In fact, I know for Alan, we'll be sending samples of this application to the board members. I just got it. We're reviewing it now. We're looking right now for, that's one item, we're looking right now for additional space. Because of the high volume of vote by mail ballots we anticipate having, we've ordered additional scanners. We're going to have to find locations to put those additional scanners. I will be meeting with 69 West Washington to see what areas are vacant. With social distancing is going to be a challenge, so we're working on that right now. In fact, that's something I hope to have answered this week. I also have I'm supposed to have a conference call with the City of Chicago about our warehouse and what situations and when they're looking to open up the warehouse, because we need to get in there and start stripping down old equipment. We're also waiting for the stay-at-home order to be lifted because we have some ESCs that are in certain locations that we can't get to right now. Going over this legislation is gonna, with our programmers, it's gonna make things a lot more difficult, but we'll be able to get it done. I'm just worried about space right now. We've, the county's looking at moving to some of their stuff to the warehouse, and we're hopefully we'll take over some of that county space to get us through the November election. But that's what we are working on right now. I know Charles has got his employees working to try to get everything done as much as possible. working from home. So, Charles?
Yes. Good morning, Madam Chair and fellow commissioners. Yeah, we have our managers at home, and we've asked that they send to Lucretia Dangerous, the Human Resource Director, their needs for returning to the office, the staffing, and what projects that we have to get done right away. So we had a WebEx meeting last week, and we talked about that, the printing of ballots, online training for judge of election, early voting judges, investigators, and deputy registrars. We still have our polling place department calling polling place proprietors to see if they're going to open up their polling place in November. So we will have advance notice, so we wouldn't have to program a poll book for that particular precinct. So once Human Resource has received from the managers their needs for reopening of employees and jobs to be done, we will have a WebEx meeting this Friday, and we'll start putting our procedures in place for the return of the employees. Other than that, just here supporting Mr. Gough and conversing with the managers to keep the process that we can keep going. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Charles, Mr. Swain,
Yes.
I have a couple questions, Charles.
Yes.
You say you're conversing with polling place folks, asking them if they're going to keep their polling place open, private polling place operators, keep their polling places open. Now, obviously, we learned from the last go-round that things can happen in the context of this type of situation. Things can happen very quickly.
Yes.
And so, while it is not clear what the fall has to bring, there are people that are concerned about having a rebound in the fall. And so I guess the question I'm asking is, have we created some kind of protocol that if people who may say yes today, if they come back later and say no, that we have either a protocol, one, to replace them, but two, some kind of protocol to let them know that they need to communicate that to us, so we're not in a situation where we're dropping our boxes or trying to drop our boxes in places that they're going to refuse them, and then we get to the same situation we had last go round.
Commissioner, yes, we do, and we're working on that. And once the calls are made, that is brought to those proprietors' attention at that time. Yes, there's protocol in place and more to be in place. But when the polling place investigators reach out to the polling place proprietors, they mention that to them. So if there's going to be a change, there will be a timely notice made to our office, and we can proceed from there.
Okay, cool. So, Adam, let me ask this question, right? And I'm not trying to. I'm going to be clear, and I'm not trying to raise this question in terms of being punitive in any way. But is there something that the law states that polling place folks have to notify us by a certain time if they're not going to be a polling place, or something, some kind of something in the law that gives us the ability to, at least hang our hat on in terms of notification?
This is Adam. Yeah, this is Adam. There's nothing in the law, particularly in regards to privately owned polling place locations. The statute just doesn't address cancellations. The statute does address replacing locations, frankly, mostly just for floods and power outages and heat loss and so forth. So there's not really. I mean, our contract does, we have a standard polling place contract that says they're not supposed to change on us or withdraw on us, but for something like this could be considered an act of God, and it has been my opinion that we shouldn't really go after people for any breach of the contract. This is a force majeure, so to speak. But no, the law does not address it. The law does address publicly owned, government-owned buildings, which are required to let us in. And so again, really, the only way for them to back out would be as if the location's just not usable.
And Commissioner,
because it's a disaster.
and Commissioner, we're paying $150.
Yeah,
rent.
okay, well,
So the only good news in all this is that the schools will be closed on election day,
right,
and that's our backup.
okay, okay, okay.
And I'm still meeting with other municipal-owned buildings with the city to see other items that we could use. So we're still being worked on.
And so with that, Lance, how does the Justice Department issue on accessibility, how does that play in with the fact that we might have to switch to schools that have not been evaluated? Does that matter at this point, or what?
And I've had two very good conversations with the Justice Department. They understand what's going on. In fact, they know that it's a problem with locations and also with funding about getting some of these up to speed. So we're still working with the Justice Department, but they know very well what we're up against.
Right. Commissioner Swain, this is Adam. I will address that a little bit more in my legal briefing as well, because I've been attending the meetings with the Justice Department on accessibility.
This is Commissioner Kresse. If I could ask, with the election day closure of all government buildings, does that increase our inventory of possible places so we might not need, if any, or at least fewer of the private properties?
Well, that's something that we're still looking at. So we're mapping out everything right now. You know, this bill it hasn't been signed yet, but it was just passed, so we're working on that right now.
Okay, it could be interesting if, go ahead.
This is Adam. I'm sorry to interrupt, but to add a little more light to your question, since the statute already required government buildings of all sorts to mandatorily make themselves be available, I think that the fact that they're just going to be closed for the day does probably not make much of a difference. With the schools, the big difference is that we could be able to use some spaces that were previously not available to us because of the children needing to use them. If a school, for example, wouldn't let us use the cafeteria because the kids need to eat lunch that day, that could be a possibility for an expanded polling location into a larger room in the school. Same might be true of government buildings.
Same with the gyms and other locations in the school. So it makes it a lot easier for us. Doesn't make it easier, but it gives us more options.
Yeah, I'm just thinking for the $150 in rent, a lot of the private locations might be willing to, if we approach them and say, look, this election year we really don't need, or this November we don't need your space, but we may need to come back to you in future elections. And I think they'd understand. But if we can use as much of the public space as we can, I think we should go for that option.
That's why it's so important to make these phone calls now.
Excellent. Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, Mr. Gough, maybe you can address the next item, which is infrastructure projects and changes in election administration and voting equipment. Is there anything else that's needed there, or is there anything new?
No, nothing new, but I do need to ask Jim Allen to get on the phone to talk about the new form that he had put together.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Allen?
Good morning, everyone. So we were preparing for 3 different scenarios per the earlier board discussions.
I think you're fading in and out.
We were preparing.
We don't hear you.
Is that any better?
Are you on the speakerphone? Because I can hear you.
Is this any better?
Yes, much better.
So, as you know from earlier board discussions, we were preparing for 3 different scenarios. One was, if the legislature took no action. The second was if they took action to require the board to mail ballots to every voter or every active voter, and the third, mailing applications to all voters. As it turns out, the legislation created a fourth scenario in which we're mailing, as Mr. Gough referenced earlier, applications to about 990,000 voters who have voted in one or more elections since November 2018. Then we would be mailing general information in the canvas, voter card mailing, including just information about applying to 560,000 other voters who have not voted in any of those elections since November 2018. But this also inherently creates a third category of mailing, and that would be a mailing that says you've already applied online, because the legislation also expands to immediately upon signage the online application process, both at the state board and with the local election jurisdictions. We talked about this at length in various management meetings, and we're determined to try to promote as much online application to vote by mail as possible. That's been the most efficient. That will reduce the need for setting up social distancing workstations to scan all of these return applications, as well as capture, the signatures and everything else. And that seems like the most efficient way. So our starting point is 990 for mailing the applications and 560 for mailing general information. But hopefully we can drive both of those numbers by heavily promoting through the month of June and early July online applications. I've sent you mock-ups, the latest mock-ups of the three versions. These incorporate some of the very latest items that are required under the legislation, including a special notice that due to COVID-19, all 2020 voters are encouraged to vote by mail or early vote ahead of Election Day. And that's all I have.
Oh,
Hello.
I'm sorry.
Commissioner Kresse is there.
I'm sorry, I was on mute, talking away.
Darn, it was my chance to take over.
Mr. Gough, do we have anything new to report on infrastructure projects and changes in election administration and the voting equipment?
not at this time, Madam Chair.
How about with regards to electronic poll books?
Nothing at the time, Madam Chair.
Okay. Mr. Lasker, I'll throw it over to you with regards to legislation.
Thank you. I did just want to quickly run through some of the highlights of the bill that has been passed by both houses now and is awaiting the governor's signature. And of course, we expect it to be signed, but most likely. As was mentioned, state holiday on November 3rd, all schools and government buildings will be briefly closed, and a lot of good help that can come from that. The election authorities are eligible to receive reimbursement for the cleaning supplies that we're going to need. The bill mandates that the schools and the election authorities clean up after themselves, but subject to the availability of federal funds, we can be reimbursed those expenses. As soon as the bill is signed into law, beginning on the effective date of the bill, the application process for vote by mail for November will open up. That does not usually happen until August 5th of this year under the normal timeline, but that will happen as soon as the bill is signed into law and enacted. And then no later than August 1st, we shall have mailed vote by mail applications to any voter who's voted, as Jim pointed out, in any election since 2018, since November 2018. Then we shall start mailing the ballots no earlier than September 24th. Hopefully we'll have things prepared and ready by then. And then another change is that the election authorities will be appointing 3 judge panels for signature verification on the incoming vote by mail envelopes. That will cause social distancing challenges for us, but we should be able to figure out ways to address that issue. We'll have to have an increased number of teams of judges. There are plenty in the pool to choose from, but I think that we'll have to find more space probably and more judges to get this done with the influx that we're expecting. The legislation does allow for what we have been calling secure drop boxes. They call them secure collection sites for postage-free return of vote-by-mail ballots. That's how they're referred to in the statute. And we have been discussing using those at our early voting sites throughout the city so that people don't need to rely on the postal service to return their ballots. I would note that although the law does not require, it had not previously required an election authority to put postage on the envelope, Chicago has been doing that, so this isn't really an issue of whether someone needs a stamp in the city of Chicago, but secure and local place to drop it off. I wanted to point out that the statute allows for the implementation of a curbside voting program during early voting. Curbside voting has previously existed in the election code in relation to election day only. So now it can be used during early voting. It does not have to be for people with disabilities. It can be for people just avoiding doing social distancing for the coronavirus. The legislation does allow for universal vote centers, actually mandates at least one universal vote center on election day. So that's good for us, as we know that helped very much in March for us. When it comes to judges of elections, they've sort of taken the previously existing high school provisions that applied to the city of Chicago and expanded them to the rest of the state, and to the extent that anyone who's 16 years or older and is a U.S. citizen and an Illinois resident is eligible to serve as an election judge. They no longer have to get approval from their principal. They no longer have to have a certain GPA. So it's not quite the same as the high school provisions, but apparently in an attempt to broaden the pool of who's available to serve as judges for November, it's now age 16 and up. And then one last little issue that we'll address is electronic service of electoral board objections will be permitted for those independent and new party candidates who file nomination papers this summer. We'll get more on those dates later. But the electronic service is an attempt to help stop the sheriff from having to go door to door, making personal service contact on people. It does beg the question as to how we can gather email addresses from the candidates who file their nomination papers. Many of the candidates, in fact, all of the candidates in this election cycle file in an office other than the Chicago Board of Election Commissioners. Some candidates, depending on the offices, file with the county clerk's office and others at the State Board of Elections. We would need those entities to gather email addresses from those candidates in order for us to be able to do this, but it is a good idea. Electronic service, of course, we always have this information on our website anyway. So that's some of the highlights of the bill. Certainly other dates and deadlines in terms of information put out and so forth, but those are some of the highlights for today.
Thank you. Mr. Lasker, how does the Judge Paul Meyers amended order affect us?
Well, yes, and so we've got an agenda item down below on the update to the calendar. Our second revision 2 weeks ago when we revised it for the first time, I did mention the possibility that the court would reconsider its earlier order, and it has done that and changed it slightly. The original order substantially lowered the signature requirements for independent and two-party candidates and also pushed back by about 6 weeks the filing period for those candidates. Upon reconsideration, that 6-week delay in the filing has been shortened. So now the deadline for filing petitions for independent and new party candidates will be July 20th, which means then that the corresponding deadline for filing objections will be July 27th. Those dates have stretched into the middle of August under the original order. So the main way that it affects us is that, as we've mentioned, July 27th will be the deadline for filing objections. It's not until about a week later under the statutory process that we can start the hearings. And one thing to note is that they would like us to be, the new legislation would like us to be sending out the vote-by-mail ballots by the date of September 24th, yes. So The real question this year is, can we start objections in the beginning, start the hearings on objections in the beginning of August, and have everything done by September 24th, the ballots printed and ready to go. And that's a very, very tight time frame, so we'll have to hope that there aren't too many challenges.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions? If not, let's proceed to new business. And is there anything further to add regarding the board's second revised 2020 election calendar that you haven't mentioned already?
No, this new addition is just those 3 dates that have been changed yet again.
Okay. Are there any questions? If not, is there a motion to? Oh,
I have a
sorry.
question.
Go ahead.
Commissioner Kresse here. Adam, do you expect anything further from the federal courts on this calendar matter?
Probably not. I don't. The motion to reconsider has now been heard and ruled on completely. This was originally an agreed upon order, and so the other provisions of it do, I believe, remain in agreement among the parties. I will remind the public that the Chicago Board of Election Commissioners was not a party to that lawsuit, but the parties who were there seem to have an agreement, so I don't think that it will go to the Seventh Circuit. I do believe things should stay the way they are as currently set.
Very good. Thank you, Adam.
You're welcome.
Okay. And is there a motion to adopt the board's second revised 2020 election calendar?
So moved, Commissioner Kresse.
Is there a second?
Second by Commissioner Swain.
It's been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Commissioner Kresse votes aye.
Commissioner Swain votes aye.
Okay, motion passes. Next item is the legal report. Mr. Lasker, anything else?
I did want to just provide a few more comments on the ongoing settlement agreement with the Department of Justice. We have been having weekly meetings, sometimes more than once a week, with the various elements of city government, the city itself, the Chicago Public School System, and the Park District primarily, all of which entities are being as helpful as ever. We're starting up the process of surveying locations yet again. The Department of Justice clearly understands that these delays have been caused by coronavirus, not by any lack of desire to get this project finished. We did discuss that schools will be closed, and we are looking at that being a big advantage to us for any precincts that we need to move. We should be able to use larger facilities within schools and even additional schools that we weren't previously using. And the school district is working with us on identifying good locations like that and then going inside and identifying good rooms like that. So the Department of Justice is monitoring every polling place that we're planning to use. There are many that might not even be on our radar screen yet because the process continues. But those meetings are attended by members from the school district and the Department of Justice and the Board of Elections. So they're all working very well together in that regard. And I just wanted to add those extra details.
Okay, great. If there are no further questions of Mr. Lasker, we will proceed with the rest of the agenda items. We have no financial report. And we will now hear from those individuals who have requested public comment. Sylvie?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You will hear first from Laura Chamberlain. Please go ahead.
Okay.
Hello, Commissioners. How are you today? I was hoping that you would consider including the vote by mail ballots in the 5% tabulation. I know it's not in the election code right now, but it certainly can be. You can do more than the election code requires. And so have you thought about that? And I'm actually a little distressed that you're thinking of just keeping all the polling places open. We thought that you would probably consolidate them. Is it too late to consolidate the polling places? We kind of highly recommend that. And then what we were hoping is that you could provide hand-marked paper ballots for early voting at the early voting centers in the ward, for the ward, not for everybody in the city, but for the ward. If you want to go and vote on a hand-marked paper ballot, you go to the ward early voting center. So hand-marked paper ballots at the early voting centers, consolidation of polling places, and the vote by mail ballots audited by a 5% tabulation. Those are three of our issues, and my email is drlora22@gmail.com, and my number is 773-486-7660. I'd love your responses. Thank you.
Sylvie, the next individual.
Yes, Madam Chair. We will hear next from Claire Tobin. Please go ahead.
Oh, good morning, Commissioners. I hope you had a nice, easy weekend for Memorial Day. So some of my questions were similar to Dr. Laura's. If you were planning to offer curbside voting during early voting and on election day, because we feel that this actually would be easier to provide good social distancing for people, maybe even from the nursing homes. They could, be driven to do curbside voting. So I hope you will consider that. Also, I know the legislation does not make any mention of how poll watchers will be included in the verification of the signature or vote by mail. But I noticed that in the guidelines for 2018 that talks about the processing of the vote by mail applications, it does include a similar three-panel judges, and it also mentions that political parties and civic organizations can be present for the verification of the signatures. So I just wanted to check on what you're planning to do for that. I think those were the questions. My email is, for response is Claire, C-L-A-R-E, no I, Tobin @yahoo.com. Thank you so much for your work.
Thank you. Mr. Lasker, is there a need for executive session?
Not today, Madam Chair, thank you. Sorry, not today, Madam Chair.
Okay. If not, then we will adjourn to our next regularly scheduled board meeting, the second Tuesday of June. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Commissioner Kresse.
Is there a second?
So moved, Commissioner Swain.
All those in favor?
Commissioner Kresse votes aye.
Commissioner Swain votes aye.
Okay. Thank you. And our motion passes, and we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, the board meeting of May 26, 2020 has adjourned. We thank you for participating.